Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. It's been a few days since the last episode of The Bad Batch has come out, labeled The Reunion. It was overall a pretty good episode. Crosshair and a group of Imperial clones corner Clone Force 99 on a scrapped Venator Class Star Destroyer on Bracca. We get to see a lot of cool internal shots of parts of the Venator Class Star Destroyer that we've never seen before, namely the inside of one of those massive ion engines. Which brings me to the point of this video. You see, in one scene, Crosshair has Clone Force 99 trapped inside one of these massive engines and things look grim. Luckily, the Bad Batch has stolen a bunch of explosives from the Venator's weapons room because Wrecker likes blowing things up, and they use these explosives to knock off the giant cover that redirects all of the radiation from the ion engines in order to escape. They do this right after Crosshair tries to flush the clones out by starting the Venator's engine. Clone Force 99 manages to ride out the terrifying radiation storm unscathed, but Crosshair is hit directly by the engine and knocked out from its force. I mean, this is a pretty messed up situation here. Crosshair is only wearing some Katarn armor and his helmet even gets knocked off by the force of this explosion. From what we can tell, Crosshair has definitely suffered from this incident. He immediately develops burns on his face, which I think are most likely a side effect of intense radiation exposure. Whatever's happened, Crosshair has clearly suffered some damage here, but the real question is, has that damage affected the inhibitor chip in his head? A Venator Class Star Destroyer is a ridiculous piece of engineering. It's more than a kilometer long, and if it were parked over Manhattan, it would be at least 12 blocks in length and at least another 6 blocks in width and its widest point. We don't know how much tonnage a Venator Class Star Destroyer actually displaces, but a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, which is a third of its length, weighs about 100,000 tons. What makes the Venator Class Star Destroyer so amazing is that despite its large size, its engines are powerful enough to allow this massive ship to fly even in atmosphere, and then also escape the Earth's gravity, or a planet's gravity. These are the same engines that blasted Crosshair in the face. There are 10 different engines on the Venator Class Star Destroyer, and they come in 3 different sizes. Unfortunately for Crosshair, the one that seems to be hitting him in the face is one of the largest ones that are closer to the middle of the ship. These engines are all powered by a main reactor, which can annihilate up to 40,000 tons of hypermatter fuel per second. This creates 3.6 by 10 to the 24th power watts. That's almost as much power being emitted by the sun. And they got some pretty serious technology in Star Wars. Now, we have ion engines here on Earth, but they're quite underpowered and they provide only around 0.1 pounds of thrust, which is far less energy than even what a human being can exert. It's about the same amount of force you would feel if you're holding around 10 quarters in your hand. The ion engines we have are perfectly fine for pushing around satellites, which have already escaped the Earth's gravity. Now, chemical rockets, which help spaceships get into orbit, are much more powerful than ion thrusters, but they usually have a fuel efficiency of around 35%, which means a lot of energy is being wasted through heat let off and other byproducts. Ion engines, on the other hand, are 90% energy efficient, which is why they're great for gradually pushing vessels to ridiculous speeds over a longer course of time. So how do these engines work? Well, ionization is the process in which electrons are stripped away from an atom, making the atom a positive charge. We remove these electrons by firing high energy electrons at these atoms. Normally, we use xenon gas in our ion drives, and these ion drives only work in vacuum because it's much easier to ionize gas in vacuum or low pressure. More than 100 satellites in geosynchronous orbits over the Earth use ion drives to keep themselves in position. The ion propulsion system developed by NASA most likely won't be that dangerous to human life, and that's because xenon gas, which is the propellant being used here, is not that reactive. Also, the density of the particles being fired out of this engine are not that high. But these particles are moving at extremely high speeds, and if they do hit your body, they could cause damage at the atomic level. Now, we don't really know exactly how the Venator Class Star Destroyer's ion engines work or what kind of propellant the engine uses. There are many types of gases that can be ionized. Some of them would create very efficient thrust, like radon, but they also have a lot of radioactive isotopes, which would increase the deadliness of the ion engine's propulsion plasma plume. So for us to know exactly how much damage Crosshair is taking in this one scene, we have to know what kind of propellant the Republic is using. In the best case scenario, if the Republic is using a less reactive gas like xenon, the sheer size of the engine will still cause some problems. Crosshair was hit so hard by the thrust that it knocks him over and created several injuries on his body and knocks his helmet loose. He most likely will have gotten hit pretty hard with some extremely fast ions, and it could have potentially hit Crosshair in the head and in the brain, especially because his helmet is off. The location of the inhibitor chip is on the side of the head, and it's completely made up of organic materials. If enough ions have hit Crosshair in the right location, we actually might see this inhibitor chip either fail or become inactive, or worse, start to malfunction. That's what happened to Clone Trooper Tup, and it eventually killed him. But this is all in the least lethal type of situation. If the Republic is using some kind of fictional exotic gas, which it most likely is, then it's very possible that the plume from this engine is highly radioactive and very, very powerful. It's possible then that Crosshair is being hit in this scene by lethal doses of radiation, like K-19 Widowmaker reactor room lethal or Chernobyl reactor lethal. Crosshair does have visible radiation burns all across his face, which is usually a troubling sign. Of course, this is Star Wars, and there's something known as a back-to-bath, which basically cures everything, including probably a massive dose of radiation. So I don't think this is going to be the end of Crosshair as we know it. It could be a new beginning. Perhaps Crosshair will now start doubting his orders. Maybe he'll fight the inhibitor chip. Maybe he'll eventually return to Bad Batch, because God knows they need some good Overwatch. Now, obviously, if this ion drive has hit Crosshair hard enough to disable his inhibitor chip, we're talking about a lot of other changes to his body. I mean, he could have, vision issues. His eyes, after all, were open and looking directly into the very bright engine. And maybe he'll suffer some personality changes, which could be fun too. Maybe Crosshair will now be a very bubbly, sweet type of person, which I would love to see. Anyway, let me know in the comment section below what you think about my theory, and if you think this prediction will come right in our next episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. My name is Alan. I'll see you next time.